Good morning, Michigan. It's Michael Patrick Shields, radio stations across the state of Michigan. And politics is our family business, especially we can get into what goes on behind the scenes and what goes on in Washington and what goes on in our state capital. Do they compare in terms of intrigue? Well, the year was 1972, and it was the Watergate scandal. Just as the Vietnam War was starting to slow down, the intrigue, and it's like a story you couldn't have written if you invented it out of whole cloth. And Terry Irving is a TV producer and a journalist. He's won 4 National Emmy Awards, Peabody Awards, and much, much more. He's produced stories from the fall of the Berlin Wall to Tiananmen Square, and he was in the newsroom when Nixon resigned from the White House in an unbelievable turn of events. We thought it was all covered in All the President's Men with Robert Redford and Dustin Hoffman, but it turns out, no. Courier, his new thriller, set right there amongst the rubble of the Nixon administration and almost the entire Republican Party. Welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
If you were inventing the characters in Watergate, you couldn't have had better casting, could you?
No, it was an amazing time, and not like anything I think we've seen since.
So the way that you tell the story in Courier, as we see all of this unfold in front of the eyes of a motorcycle courier in the days, obviously, before email and all the rest, and we didn't even have faxes at the time, and so that's how
we didn't even have push-button phones.
Yeah, and so that's how you tell the story of what happened at Watergate. So for those, because let's face it, you and I remember, we know, but there are a lot of young people now who don't know what that means, that what is a Watergate and that kind of thing. Tell us, as if you're reading off the inside flap of your book, how that could have happened, what happened, and why your take on it is so different.
Well, let me step back a second, and because I forgot this in the last interview, my book is a thriller. It's a book, and it's a book about a young man who is a Vietnam veteran, and he's got the demons in his brain. And he solves them by riding his motorcycle as fast as he possibly can, and he finds a job that allows him to do that, and that's being a courier. And the reason for that is that, along with no faxes and no emails, and I really don't remember how we ever got anything done, there was no video. There was film, and film had to be brought back to the studio to be processed and put on the air. And we had about, in Washington, there was probably 15, 20 guys and 2 girls who rode like bats out of hell across Washington to make sure, I'm sorry, folks, to make sure that film made it back in time to get on the air. And that's what the protagonist in the book is doing. And he picks up the wrong piece of film, and all of a sudden everyone around him is getting killed, and people are trying to kill him.
You worked as a senior live control room producer at CNN, Fox, ABC, MSNBC. You wrote and edited copy for Ted Koppel and Diane Sawyer and Wolf Blitzer. How would Watergate's story be different if it happened today instead of back in the early 70s when you were, as you say, burdened by the lack of technology, really?
It wasn't really the lack of technology. It isn't that it's less criminal now. It is after the 1975-76 Frank Church hearings, where everything came out. It is nowhere near as bad as it was then. I mean, back in the Nixon period, it was Wild West. It was wide open. There were virtually no laws that meant anything for the government. The FBI was run by one guy, J. Edgar Hoover, who'd run it his entire life, and had just died. And if you wonder why Deep Throat was an FBI senior agent, it's because they hated the White House. And the White House could do whatever it wanted, and it did. It shook down major corporations for campaign donations. It went overseas for campaign donations. And I was surprised. I was there at the time, and if I had said to somebody who cared what a courier had to say, I was a courier, that this sort of stuff was going on, they would have said I was nuts. And it was. And now, yes, there's still malfeasance and, people acting badly in Washington. but it's not the same. There are far more rules. There are far more laws. There are far more people watching, and the theft is more legal. It happens on Wall Street, he says resignedly.
Out of Ted Koppel and Diane Sawyer and Wolf Blitzer, because you've worked with all three of them, Aaron Brown too, I guess, if you want to throw him in there. Which was the most? Which was the real stickler for good copy and the language?
Tight fight between Ted Koppel and Aaron Brown. Ted Koppel was, is. Just, have you met in your life people that are just so smart that you sort of look at them and go, oh, wow. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're just so fast and so smart, and they've read everything and they know everything. Well, that's Koppel. Aaron was a joy to write for because he had incredibly high standards, and he demanded originality above all things. So you had to write sort of, a friend of mine said, ruminatively. I mean, you had to sort of think about it as you wrote and write in thought patterns, and he was a tremendous influence on my writing.
Well, was he an egomaniac?
They all are. I'm sorry. I mean, that's been my line for 40 years. Every anchor is an egomaniac. I mean, it's a requisite of the job. It just depends on whether they're nice. In these cases, they were all very nice. I mean, Aaron and Wolf and Ted and Diane, who I only wrote for once or twice, they're nice people, but they are raging egomaniacs. I mean, think about maybe you probably may know about it, but to think that you have the right to sit and speak to 1 million people, 6 million people, and that they should listen to what you have to say, what else would you call that? It's not a negative.
Point taken and point made by Terry Irving, a longtime journalist and author. Now, the book is called Courier, and it's about the Watergate scandal through the eyes of a guy who was shuttling film around, and he was there himself. 15 after the hour with Michael Patrick Shields.